Hello. So, last class we discussed consumer resource dynamics, which was actually our first example of a system with three species. Right? We had a situation where we had two consumers and one resource, or we even discussed qualitatively when we have four species, two resources and two consumers. So these are examples of what is called community moduli. So moduli is the plural of modulus. In English, they use the Latin word modulus. In Portuguese, it would be modulo, in modulus. In English, they use modulus. In the plural is moduli. Which are systems of 3 or 4, 5 species that are in a configuration of who consumes what and so on. They are in a configuration that happens very often in nature. So, what does it mean? Actually, interactions, and here we are talking more about trophic interactions, consumer resource interactions. They are immersed in large food webs or networks of interactions. Okay? But there are some kinds of arrangements that inside these are quite common. And there are situations as the same thing as we had with, for instance, predator-prey dynamics. Okay, predator-prey dynamics is also immersed in a lot of interactions, in networks of interactions. But there are situations where the interaction between predator-prey is really what matters for the dynamics of certain species. Okay? So there are interactions that are much more important than others, for instance. So there are many situations where we had predator-prey dynamics being almost disconnected from the rest of the network of interactions. Okay? So the same thing can happen with more species when we talk about, say, 3 species. Okay? Some moduli appear very frequently in trophic networks and or mutualistic networks and so on. So there is this concept of community moduli, and there are certain moduli which are usually studied and discussed because they are important. Okay? So today we will talk about this, but I don't want to make it too technical, because actually doing all calculations, writing down all equations would be time consuming, and it's not the idea to have this here. And so I will talk about 2 or 3 of them, which are examples. What? Just for people that are not coming from ecology and so on. So community, in this case, when you say, this course is about population ecology. Okay? But there's also things called community ecology. Community, usually, when you go to a classes of community ecology, they will talk about communities, many species, usually large networks, and it is in this kind of class that you will discuss biodiversity issues and stability of of large networks and so on. We are not doing this. This is not a subject of our course, but there is this intermediate case where you have these systems which can be studied from the point of view of population dynamics, but constitute, let's say, the smallest possible communities and are important for the structure of communities. So that's the name community comes from. Well, so the first thing is, let us go back here for a resource and a consumer 1 and consumer 2, which is what we studied in the last class. And so what did we discover by studying this and supposing that the consumer was could be biotic or abiotic dynamics for the consumer. We used abiotic dynamics just to make the calculation simple. But we discovered that there's always exclusion of one of the consumers. Okay? So we had a rule, which was the R star rule. There was an R star 1 and there was an R star 2, where R star was the level. If you have only one consumer, say species 1, and it gets into in equilibrium with the resource will have a certain level of equilibrium with that consumer, and this level was called R star for species 1, for species 2, and what we saw is the species that can stay in equilibrium with the resource at the lowest possible level, has the smallest R star, is the one that wins the competition and eliminates the other one. Okay? So this is reasonable. This means that, say, species 1 is the one that has the smallest R star, so it can consume the resource and take it to a level where consumer 2 cannot live on a smaller level of resources, and therefore it gets out of the system, it dies, and then we have at the end only one species of one consumer and one resource. Okay, so this is the thing that happens. Now, let's say we have a situation where one of these consumers is actually able to predate on the other consumer. Okay? Say species 1 can also predate species 2. Okay? So, what are your guesses of what will happen with this system? Let me see. What's your guess? Where's the mic?
Well, it's a guess that at this point we will have coexistence of both consumers, because now we have another way of one of the consumers surviving without the previous stable point of resources.
So you could have coexistence, but let's go on this path. So will we have always coexistence?
My first guess would be exclusion of C2.
Yeah, C2 is being predated by C1, right? Okay. So this can happen also. So the thing is, in which situation you expect exclusion of C2 or coexistence or exclusion of C1, I don't know. Okay?
Sorry. I think it will be depending on what would be the initial system. So you said that if R1 is smaller, right? then we will have that the population C1 will survive in the initial system, and the population 2 will die, right? So if population 2 will die in the initial system, if there's predation over them, then the situation is even worse, right? Then
Yeah.
they will surely really die very fast.
Yeah.
And in the other case, just lost.
Yeah.
And in the other case, in which C2 has in which C1 is consumed, I don't know, like in the other case, there's going to be some kind of balance, and there's going to be coexistence maybe. So I think that's.
Yeah, exactly. If it's in this system here, let's say that when you don't have this, let's say that C1 was the winner of the competition, okay? And then it also is able to predate on C2, okay? So that's the worst case for C2. It was already going to be eliminated, and it's going even faster, as you say. Okay? But now you could have the situation in which you have the resource, and maybe C2 is the winner of the competition. So it would eliminate C1. Okay? But C1 can predate on C2. Therefore, there could be an equilibrium, okay? Because kind of, yeah, you see that there we have two things. We have a competition, and we have the predation. And if the species that is the best competitor, but is predated, then there could be maybe some kind of compensation. Okay. So.
Is there a situation where C2 is excluded if R2 is like too much small and the predation?
No, C2 here C2 is excluded if C2 is predated by C1. Okay. Now suppose that if C2 if there was no predation, C2 would be also excluded by competition. So it is always excluded. I mean, it was going to be excluded, and on top of the competitive exclusion, on top of this, it is predated. So it goes away anyhow. The point is that there could be equilibrium when the competition would give C2 the possibility of excluding C1 without the predation. It would be the winner, okay, has the smallest R star. But due to predation, it has a competitive advantage, but it's a prey. Okay? So when the one that would have competitive advantage is a prey and not the predator, then you could have equilibrium. Yeah. Oh, no. You raised your hand? No.
What if C1 would be the better competitor, but C2 is an essential resource?
Oh, okay. Okay. So we are not.
We also could have coexistence.
Yes. Well, we have not discussed the case of essential resources, but yes. Then if C1 is the best competitor, but C2 is and also praise C2 and it's essential, then what could happen is that the system crashes. Just C1 consumes everything and then dies out of without food. Right? Yeah, this is a possibility. I didn't think about it, but it's a possibility. Yes, if it's an essential resource. So now, when let's discuss a little bit more. So when is competition important? So you have predation, you have competition, okay? Competition through the resource exploitation, and you have the predation. Which one is more important and in which situation? So when is competition actually important?
When resources are finite?
So if the resources are finite, competition will be important. So say competition will, let's say, we can do this mathematically, but let's do it only verbally. Let's say that there are the resources are very abundant, right? So if you have a lot of resources, competition is not very important, okay? Therefore, there's no big issue being the best competitor, okay? In this case, you expect that, well, predation will be more important. And this guy, the predator, will actually prevail because even if the other one, let's say C2 is the best competitor, okay? Let's say C2 is best competitor. But if competition is not important, okay, then there's no big issue in being the best competitor. Therefore, you expect the predation will be more important, and that the predator will, at the end, eliminate C2 and stay on only with the resource. Now, there could be the exactly opposite case, in which competition is very important. Okay? So, this is the case when the resources are really finite and are close to some critical level, for instance. So, if competition is very important, okay, then there could be the case where predation is not very important. Okay? So then, in this case, you could have the elimination of C1. If C2 is the best competitor and competition is very strong, it can drive C1 to extinction, even C1 being able to predate on it. Okay? Because there is this balance, but what is more important? Competition or predation? Okay? So, and this is I say this is determined by the level of the resources. So, yeah, the mic, okay, the mic is here.
You said that if competition was more important, then maybe C2 would survive even if C1 was predating C2.
Yeah.
But then in that case, C2 is a resource to C1.
Mm-hmm.
So even if C2 was winning with the resource, C1 would still be able to predate C2, and C2 would be a resource. So
yeah, you're talking about intermediate cases, okay? I'm trying to talk about the extreme cases where the competition is, the resources are so low that the best competitor has a big advantage, okay? And, okay, then predation, and you could have a certain level of predation that could get back to equilibrium, yeah? But let's say competition is much more important than predation, okay? Then C1 could be turned to extinction.
But still, in my mind, that goes closer to the example that he gave, where, like, if R was an essential resource that could cause the extinction of C1, but if both C2 and R were like interchangeable for C1, why would C1 get extinct if R was enough resource for C2 and C2 was enough resource for C1?
So it could be, let's say there is not this predation, okay? And let's say C2 outcompetes C1. C2 wins the competition without it. Now, you turn on predation here, but a very low level of predation. Maybe the efficiency of the predator is small. And then this will not overcome the competitive exclusion. Right? So there has to be a certain level, a certain intensity, let's say, of the predation that can re-equilibrate the system. Okay? Not any will depend a little. Will depend on the attack rate and on the efficiency of the predation. If predation is not very strong, or then there's a tendency for competition to be much more important than predation. Yeah.
So just to clarify then, if C2 was a better competitor in relation to C1,
Yeah.
but C1 was a great predator, then there could be a system where R would provide resource for C2 and C2 would provide resource for C1 and no one would get like
Yes,
extinct.
that could be back to equilibrium if the predation is sufficiently efficient. Okay, that's not any level of predation. That's the point. It's a quantitative point. Okay, there can be equilibrium and etc. If the best competitor is the prey. Okay, because if the best competitor is also the predator, then obviously the prey goes extinct. Okay, but if the best competitor is the prey, there can be equilibrium. My only point is not necessarily. Okay? For a certain efficiency of certain level of predation, this will happen. If predation is very inefficient, then will not be okay. So I can write a system which is easy to write for this. Okay. I don't want to do a lot of calculations here, but let's see. So this is called, this community modulus is intra-guild predation. And intra-guild predation, why is this name? Because you have two consumers of the same resource, so they are called a guild, right? And then you have an intra-guild predation, which is this. Okay? This is some, and it is not. And so we will have the resource. So the equation for the resource has to be something like this. Right? Certain level of logistic growth, and K is regulating the resource abundance. Then it can be predated by either C1 and I will put A. C2. So it's consumed by both. Okay, so that's just what we had before. Then let us write dt for C1. So C1 is the predator, and so now let me just to follow my. Let us write first the intra-guild prey. Okay, will be C2, and it is C2 has some level of okay, let me see. Yeah. Let me I will just change the notation here in order to be I've put in this one without the accent. So this would be A times some efficiency of the resource. Then it is consumed by some alpha by C1, and it has a natural death rate. Okay? Mortality of C2. Okay? And the integral predator will be some C1 times some term of conversion of the resource plus some alpha times some efficiency of predation times C2 minus M1. Okay? Okay? So this is the resource that grows logistically and that's consumed by both consumers. This is the consumer C2, which grows due to the interaction with the resource, but is predated, therefore it's a minus sign, by C1, the C1 times C2. I'm using just the Holding type 1 functional response, which is linear, and there is a certain mortality rate for this. This is integral predator, which is C1 grows due to the consumption of resources and also by conversion of C2 into C1, and that has a certain mortality rate. Okay? So these are the equations. Yeah.
Sorry, it's just that I can't follow very well all the parameters. Specifically A and B, what do they mean?
So A, and this here is a Lotka-Volterra equation, yes? So we have just this term will give you dr dt equal something which will be R times A R C1 A dot minus A R C2. So this is the attack rate. This is the same thing as the Lotka-Volterra, as the Rosenzweig-McCarter, and the consumer resource dynamics that we have seen. It's just R times two species interacting, and there's a coefficient which is the attack rate. It's again, if you want, if you have only one consumer, and A is the number of per capita number of resources that it's consumed by consumer one. Okay, and B are just the efficiency of conversion of the resource into the consumers. Okay, because this term here is a term of consumption of resources by consumer one, and then it has. Therefore, it's a resource. Therefore, it gives rise to a new number, a new consumer one here, a new number of consumers. It's the birth rate. It's connected to the consumption of resource by C1. Therefore, you have this A that was here. And then there's efficiency, because it's not that one individual of resources goes to one individual of consumers. So there is a certain proportionality constant, which is the B. Okay? And then, boom, same for both species. Okay? Okay, where is the... Now, so these are the equations, and now we want only to take a look at what we would get if we look for the fixed points. Okay? So if we look for the fixed points, we will look first for these, both of these. So let us see, we will write dc2 dt equal to 0, and dc1 dt equal to 0. And also this equal to 0, but I don't need this equation. You will see that for the qualitative discussion, I don't need this. So dc2 equal to 0 will give you, and okay, what we want? We want to see when there can be coexistence between C1 and C2. Okay? So I will assume that C1 and then C2 are not 0. Right? I'm assuming that they are non-zero. Therefore, if I find a situation where this is possible, I can have coexistence. Okay? So I want to find a condition for coexistence. Okay? So this implies for C2 that A times B times R minus alpha C1 minus M2 is equal to 0. Therefore, I will get some R, which I will call R star, the equilibrium value of the resource, being equal to M2 minus, I have, minus alpha sorry, it's M2 plus alpha times C1 star, okay, at equilibrium, divided by IAB, right? So that's would be R star, okay? And this is obviously larger than M2 over AB, right? Correct? Yeah. Okay. Now, this here will give you the same kind of calculation, will give you A, B, R star plus alpha beta times C2 star, I put a star here, minus M1 equal to 0, which implies that R star would be equal to M1 over alpha beta over alpha beta minus over A minus alpha beta times C2 star, okay, which is smaller than M1 over A. Okay. So now let's see. I have not found any contradiction because I have still equation with C1 and C2, okay? So in principle there are solutions which have can be calculated for the fixed points. In order to get the solutions you will need to use also this equation, but in principle it's okay. But now let's look, what is M2 over AB? Okay, M2 over AB would be the level of, say you don't have C1, okay? If you don't have C1, you have only the consumption of the resource by C2, okay? And therefore there's not this equation, there's no term here, you have only resource and C2. What would be the level of equilibrium between the resource and consumer C2 would be given by this equal to 0, okay? And this would give you that the R of equilibrium between resource and consumer C2 would be M2 over AB, which is this thing, which is therefore the what we call the R star of C2 of R star 2, which is the R star of what would be the prey. Okay? And this, by the same reasoning, is just R star of this population 1 in the absence of population 2. Okay? Therefore, I need that the equilibrium level of the resource with the complete system has to be such that we have these inequalities which are here. So it has this is a necessary condition. It's not sufficient. It's a necessary condition for coexistence. Okay, so this is the predator. This one is the predator. Okay, then this is predator, and this is the prey. So you need these inequalities in order to have coexistence. Otherwise, you don't have. Okay. So, and this will depend obviously on all the coefficients and so on. I don't want to calculate the coefficients and discuss this, but I'm just saying there is the possibility from this equation to see that you can have some actual you can have coexistence if the system is such that the equilibrium value of R obeys this inequalities. Okay? So,
Sorry, it went a bit too fast. Can you explain this part of R2 star and R1 star again?
so what not wire? In the last class we saw that if you have DC, for instance, 1 dt equal to let me see. I did use C1 times and suppose you don't have one of the species. In this case, I'm taking C2 out. Okay, then you have something like this. You have R times logistic growth or whatever growth you want, and the resource is being consumed at by C1 minus C1 minus some mortality, let's say M. Okay? M of the resource. Okay? Mortality of resource. Okay? So this is the system of one consumer and one resource. What is the level of equilibrium of the resource and the consumer in this system? It's the fixed point where I put this equal to 0 and this equal to 0. Okay? And this equal to 0 says that R at equilibrium, okay, is equal to M, in this case M1 over IP. Okay? So this is what we called R star in the last class. Okay? That's the level of equilibrium of the resource with consumer 1, when consumer 2 is absent. Okay? And the same thing, changing 1 per 2. Okay? This is R star. What we call 1, and this is what we call 2. Okay? So these are the level of equilibrium between the species that 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 would be the equilibrium in absence of the other species. And therefore, I'm saying that for the complete system of integral predation, the level of equilibrium, which is this guy, which I did not go to calculate completely because I would have to solve the equation, the 3 equations and so on. But I just saw that I could give this as an inequality because this is always positive and this is always negative. Okay? So you have to do this kind of thing. Okay? So, very good. So, now, actually, this is only a necessary condition. It's not sufficient. Actually, this system, the full dynamics of the system is much more complicated. Depending on the parameters you have, can have elimination of the integral prey, elimination of the integral predator, coexistence, and then you have also parameters where the situation depends on the initial condition. So that's full dynamics has lots of different possibilities. Okay? So this is one of the community modulus that is interesting and it's easy to calculate things. Now let's go for a different one. You have here one predator, and you have, let's see what I use, 2 species that this predator predates. What do you think will happen with this system? Coexistence, 3 of them, elimination. What should happen?
I think I had that idea, but then I lost the idea, and I'm not sure anymore. Just
back.
wait a second, and then maybe I'll give you yours.
Okay, okay. Mike. Long way from Mike. Okay. Well, there's some.
This is a case where you can have coexistence mediated by a predator, but it depends on the pressure of predation on each of the prey.
Okay, so we are not we are not saying that these actually are competitors, okay, between them for resource exploitation. Maybe this has one resource and the other one has a completely other resource, and they would coexist anyhow, okay. But now you put on the predator. Okay? So then the question is, what would happen?
Are we considering satiation or handling time of some sort?
No. You can do a model with this and it's all complications you want, but no. The idea is just what you expect to happen.
Maybe maybe one species will go extinct.
Yeah, but
the one preferred by the predator.
Inferior?
The one preferred by the predator.
So let's say the predator has no preference. Okay, that's the idea that came back.
So I was thinking that maybe there can be there can be some oscillation depending on the parameters, because if one population is consumed a lot, its density will diminish, and then there will be less encounters. So the predator has to will not be able to find one of these preys, right? And then he will have to resort to another. So while he's resorting to this other, maybe there will be a chance for the first one to start growing again.
Yeah.
So I think maybe
this can actually happen. It depends a little bit on what your hypothesis about the dynamics of the prey. Because remember, if we say you don't have this guy, okay, then it's predator prey, and we know that predator prey depends. If you go for Lotka Volterra, everything oscillates. If you go for Lotka Volterra with a carrying capacity for the prey, it oscillates but goes to a fixed point. And if you have Rosenzweig-Mercator with satiation and so on, you can have both. You can have fixed point, you can have oscillations. And therefore, well, with two of them, you have a whole possibility of combinations with oscillations and non-oscillations, okay? So it depends on what you it depends on what the dynamics of the prey would be. If it's usually what we think is that if these have carrying capacities, but we don't take into account satiation and so on, it should go to a fixed point, although it could go by oscillating and then going to a fixed point. Yeah, so more. Can there be any elimination? Yeah, the mic is there. Okay.
Morning. When I come to here today, I was thinking about the something that looks like that. I was thinking about human population and two resources, water and energy. So I asked to an AI to give AI, thanks, to give me a Python code to reproduce this relationship of one consumer and two resources. And she gave me a plot that the consumers go to extinction and the two resources stabilize in one moment.
But you have two consumers and
no, one consumers and two resources. But I was thinking, and I don't know how to do this interlink when we think about the water energy nexus, that you need water to generate energy and energy to generate water.
Yeah. Okay. So then you won't have an interlink between both of them, which is not in the problem here. Okay.
No, but when I plot this, it was something like this without the interlink.
Yeah. I mean, if you think that the water will generate the energy and will be consumed by somehow consumed, then say this is water and this is energy, then there would be a kind of link here. Okay, water becoming energy. Okay, there would be a link in this case. But well, so there is obviously always one possibility. That is total extinction. If, remember, when we have consumer resource dynamics, there is a minimum level of the resource in order for the consumer to be able to exist. Okay? That was, we shortly discussed this last class. In the beginning of last class, there was this level of, it was a ladder S, which was the level of the richness of the environment. And you have to have a minimum level. So let's suppose that we have this, that in the absence of species 2, this is a viable situation. In the absence of N1, it's also viable. So let's see, let's suppose that there are enough resources for equilibrium between P and N1 and P and N2. The question is, when both now are here, what could happen. So could there be the elimination of N1 or N2? Or no? Yes, why? Hmm? Mm-hmm. They might. Okay, no, it's okay.
If there's a huge population of predators and small population of the two resources, I guess it will lead to that.
So, if there's, I mean, we have also to make some hypotheses about the predation, okay? So if this guy also has other resources, then he can just eat them and stay with the other resources. But say now that this predator is dependent on them, okay? So, because obviously if he has a lot of other ways of getting food, resources, then obviously can just consume everything here and then continue to exist with other resources, okay? It would be a case, but I mean, let's go for just this. Let's not assume there are any other things. Okay. Yeah.
So I was going to make a question and observation. From what I understand, most systems that we're looking at, the predator population is always regulated only by the prey population.
Yeah, in this case.
So in that case, I can only guess there would be extinction of one of them if the predator had a preference.
Yeah, but say it has not. Okay.
Then I don't know.
So let's see. Okay, now here's our predator, and here are our prey. Okay, there's one more opinion.
A suggestion that came into my mind. Right now we're thinking them as independent, but if we think that the predator depends on both N1 and N2 to survive, an extinction of only one of them, N1 or N2, could already bring the predator to extinction.
Yeah. So if they are essential, then sure, then you could have collapse of predator population. If say this predator needs both of them, they are not interchangeable. Okay, then it could happen that it overconsumes, say, population N2, and then it will could decline because of one of the essential resources is gone. Okay. Yeah, but let's stay simple. Just with this things here, no essential resources. Now let's think about the following. What happens? So these have certain population levels. Say they have some carrying capacities, okay, which regulate their populations. Okay. Now say I have a situation like that, and I increase population 1. What will happen if I go there and then somehow I'm able to manipulate to manage the carrying capacity, and I increase population 1. What do you expect?
N1 will increase the population, and the population of predators will increase as well. But this increase in population of predators will increase the pressure on the population of N2.
Yes. So if I increase population N1 through this mechanism of increasing the predator population, this will make the population N2 decrease. And vice versa. If I increase population 2, this will have the effect of decreasing population 1. So this reminds you that what kind of situation have you studied where you have one population, and the increase of one population is bad for the other population, and vice versa. Competition. So how's the name of this modulus? Is apparent competition. They are not actually, between N1 and N2, they are not competing for the same resource. Okay? But they have a shared predator. Okay? So if N1 increases, this has a negative effect on N2, and N2 increases, a negative effect of N1. Okay? So this can be studied. It's not very different and very, very complicated. It's the same things that I have done for the other cases, but I don't want to do the math now. Now, okay, so there's competition. Usually when you have competition, what do you have? Exclusion. Right? So you could ask, will we have exclusion here? Okay? So obviously, this depends a little bit on what you have as hypothesis about carrying capacities, or if there's satiation or not. You can have a whole bunch of things. But staying with the simplest case, no essential resources, and no satiation taken into account, and just usual things like there's a certain growth rate for this one, there's a certain growth rate for this one, then there's a certain consumption by this guy, and this guy also may have carrying capacity, with simple things. Then it is possible to show that there is always competitive exclusion, as in the case of real competition. And then you would say, which one will be excluded? Okay, what are the characteristics of the species that will determine which of them will be excluded? So remember, before we had the R rule. The R rule says that if you have competition for resources, the species that is able to be in equilibrium with the resources at the lowest level is the one that will prevail, the one that will. Okay, so the ability to be with the resources at a certain level that the other one cannot survive. That was all the story about the R star rule. Okay, for the same for this system, there's a P star rule. Okay, so the P star rule can be calculated, and if you want, you can easily write down a system of equations that very similar to the ones that we had. If you want, that could be a good exercise for you. And the P star rule says the following: that you have the species that is able to stay in equilibrium with the predator at the highest value of the predators is the one that will prevail. So it's a different inequality with the resources. The one that can stay in equilibrium with the lowest amount of resources is the one that prevails. And here it is a different inequality. It's the one that is able to stay in equilibrium with the highest amount of predators is the one that will exclude the other. Okay? It's the winner of the competition. So apparent competition is very, very common in nature, actually, and has also a competitive exclusion situation as in the competition for resources. Right? Okay? So this is nice. You don't have them competing, but actually competing for resources, but actually you have this. Okay? Then you could also go on and improve this, which is how it's called. You could do this, I would say that now maybe they are also competing. Actually, there's a resource here, and you would have this. Okay, this is more complicated, yes? You have apparent computation and actually computation for resources, okay? So this is diagram modulus, right? Called diagram modulus. And well, there can be many possible configurations, and what you would have, in order to have coexistence, in this case, you would have that the better competitor for resources. Right? Therefore, if this is not present, say N1 excludes N2. Right? If this, and you introduce a predator, and you didn't have this, then you would say the one that wins the actual competition can be in equilibrium with this one if the predator, if this guy would be eliminated by the predator. Okay? So you have to have a better competitor for resources, and the other one has to be a better competitor through apparent competition. Okay? So then you could have equilibrium of the four species. Okay? But again, this is possible. I'm not saying that's always will happen. Okay? It will depend on the levels and the parameters and lots of things. Okay? But there could be, in this case, a stability, an equilibrium. So you can say that, for instance, if you didn't have this, you would have competitive exclusion, but then you can find a mechanism of coexistence by having a predator on top of them. Okay? That this could promote coexistence. Okay? So this is the diamond diagram. And well, one other which is usually studied is just a linear chain. Okay? Linear chain would be the resource, the mesopredator, and the predator. Okay? This is it's simple, and this is what we already talked about, which is, for instance, in a paper that I mentioned, that it's called cats that protect birds. So the resource here, prey, would be like birds, and mesopredator were the rats, and the cats were the top predators. And say you didn't have the cats, then you have a certain equilibrium between these. And then when you introduce the cats, and actually that happened in certain places, because cats were not endemic, cats were introduced, what happened is this one increases because the population of the rats is being regulated from the top. Okay? So this creates this image of, you put the cats, and the number of birds increases. Okay. So, but then, well, you could also have more situations, like this guy could also maybe consume this one. So it has two. Okay. But if you rearrange this, okay, you have let's see. Yeah, in this case you have the predator that consumes M and R. So M and R would be resources for the predator. I can just redraw this like this. Okay? But then M also consumes the resource, the birds. Okay? You could have this kind of thing, which is a kind of also that you can have some kind of equilibrium here. Okay? So that are all the community modulus that I will discuss. Just to give you an idea, I will stop in 10 minutes because I have to leave a little bit earlier. Just as a last puzzle, there is a famous example. And it's just the following, that it actually happened in Africa, and I think in Kenya. So you have a situation where you have humans, you have cattle, you have zebras, and other ungulates. Okay? A lot of things happening. You have this. And then you have, at a certain point, there was a wildlife reserve was created, eliminating humans and eliminating cattle. And what happened is that the the other ungulates, not the zebras, other ungulates actually decreased their population level. What do you think? How do you think that this can be explained? So, we had humans, we had cattle, we had zebras, we have ungulates. We eliminate this, and this decreases. Hypothesis. Why is the number of ungulates decreasing? The idea was to protect wildlife, yes? The idea was protect them, creating a reserve. And what happened is, well, they actually got to smaller population levels. Well, not eliminated, but small population. Any idea why? So, there's one idea there.
I mean, the cattle I can understand, because probably the predator that consumes the cattle also consumes the ungulates. So if there's no cattle, there's no ungulates.
No. So first, what is why are the effect of cattle in the concrete system when cattle is here? And one thing is it competes with zebras. So
I don't exactly have an answer. It just reminded me of some ecological relationships in African savannas, where, for instance, we need elephants. Like, elephants will tear down some trees and like keep the
population of ants.
Yeah,
there's a system, elephants,
and herbs,
trees,
I don't know.
And ants.
Low, and then humans could also use fire, and that would also keep the herbs low, and then that would affect the other populations. So I'm guessing maybe cattle, the fact that it grazes would help ungulates somehow. I don't know.
One thing is, let's see, if you take only cattle out, okay, then you would expect zebras to increase the population, for sure, okay? And ungulates maybe also, okay? Now, actually, there is a population that I didn't write down here for this situation, which is actually the secret population, which is if I go for, I put this, I think both of them get out of this. So in principle, population of zebras should have, say, okay, I'm fine. I will increase because I'm not competing with this cattle anymore, okay? And humans don't consume zebras usually. So therefore, humans being there or not, for the zebra, in principle, would be nothing. But humans protect the system from lions. If you have no humans, you usually don't have lions. So the humans will do something to not coexist with the lions. They will get the lions out. If you go to the reserve, then you can have predators, like lions, or others also, okay? And what is the effect of having the lion? So I don't have humans, I don't have cattle, but predator, right? Lion. Now, the big difference between zebras and the other ungulates is zebras have very high populations. They are very abundant. I mean, even just looking at, I don't know, National Geographic, see all the zebras, it's not one or two zebras, okay? So it's always big groups of zebras, right? So now, lions will predate both on zebras and the other ungulates also, okay? Yeah, but the effect on the zebras is not so important because there's such a big population that the lions will, through a kind of satiation effect, will not actually affect much the population of zebras. Okay? So the effect on lions on zebras is small. Okay? It's the same thing as when you have fish schools and you have a shark. I mean, the population of the fishes are not very much affected by one shark because if there are 10,000 fishes and she consumes 2 or 3, then it doesn't have an important effect in this case. And this is also happens that zebras are not very much affected by the population of lions, but these guys are not in the same numbers of this, and they get affected through the presence of the lions. And that is why you create a reserve, you allow the lion to, I'm saying lions means predators, okay? To get into the system, zebras are not very much affected. Actually, they grow because they don't have the cattle to compete. And predation is not, it's not very important on them, on their population, but it is on the other ungulates. And then, therefore, the other ungulates decrease the population. This is what the explanation of this kind of situations where you had humans actually protecting the ungulates. Human had the same effect as the rat, as the cat that protects birds. Okay? And not exactly the same diagram because it's protecting from the lion. Okay? So you see, there are complex situations that sometimes this is mentioned always as the counterintuitive effects of protecting wildlife. Okay, so you wanted to actually protect the system. It is going to a different equilibrium that you expected, where you have less ungulates than you would have if the humans were there. Okay, so I think that's all for today. Do you have any other questions? Okay, so Monday we have 2 classes. And this will be the last class, I think, about this population dynamics in ecology. And we will discuss vegetation dynamics as an example of something which is interesting, which is alternative stable states. And the second class we will do the kind of question and answers and discussions that we have usually, we are having this at Fridays. But this Friday, I mean, we had only 2 classes this week and there's not so much to discuss. So we have second part of Monday will be questions in general about anything we ever see. Okay? And then we will have an introduction to epidemiology, modeling in epidemiology. Okay, thank you.